The sky over the French countryside was a canvas of steel gray, streaked with veins of lightning that lit up the winding hills. Claire held her coat tightly around her, the hem fluttering in the wind as she stepped out of the taxi in front of La Rose Hotel. It was nestled between rows of wild roses and cypress trees, a place she had read about in travel essays, a retreat for artists, lovers, and those who had something to forget. She had come alone, with nothing but a leather satchel and her worn-out laptop bag. A novelist from London, Claire had once written stories that spilled out of her heart like songs. Lately, though, she felt drained, distant, as though her own story had gone quiet. The rain picked up just as she pushed through the heavy wooden doors. The lobby was a stark contrast to the storm outside: warm-toned walls, velvet sofas, crackling fire, and antique sconces that flickered with soft yellow light. And then she heard him. Stormy night for a getaway. The voice was low, textured like sanded wood. She turned and found herself staring at a man who looked as though he had stepped out of a film noir. Dark curls damp from the rain, sharp cheekbones, collar slightly askew. His eyes, dark brown, almost black, held a glint of amusement. Claire, caught off guard, replied without thinking, "Maybe the storm was part of the plan." He tilted his head. "Romantic idea. Are you an artist?" "I'm a writer." "Thought so," he said, smiling. Writers always carry weather inside them. He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Julian." "Claire." The touch of his hand sent a quick, warm ripple through her spine. Not flirtatious, just familiar. Comforting. As if they'd met before in another life. The receptionist handed them their room keys. Fate, or coincidence, had placed them side by side. Room 212 and 214, as they stood by the elevator. Julian leaned slightly closer. "Well, neighbor, if you hear thunder tonight, that's just the sky applauding your arrival." Claire laughed softly. "I'll keep that in mind." But in truth, it wasn't thunder she heard in her room that night. It was her own heartbeat, louder than usual. Later that night, after unpacking and failing to write a single word, Claire stood barefoot by the tall window of her room. The storm had lessened to a light drizzle. She held a glass of red wine, her robe tied loosely, the soft fabric brushing her knees. The dim golden glow of the lamp reflected off the rain-slicked glass, and somewhere in the background, soft piano music played from her phone. Then a knock. She opened the door slightly, unsure, and there he was, Julian, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. His hair slightly tousled, a gray t-shirt hugging his chest, eyes a little more tired but no less captivating. "I hope I'm not being rude," he said, "but I hate drinking alone." Claire hesitated. Logic whispered no. Curiosity whispered yes. She opened the door wider. "Come in." The room felt smaller with him inside, not in a suffocating way, but full. Alive. He poured the wine, handed her a glass, and they sat across from each other, cross-legged on the bed like old friends who had lost time. "So," she asked, "what brings a poetic stranger to a hotel in the hills?" "I'm a photographer," Julian said. "I was supposed to shoot a vineyard nearby. The shoot got canceled. I stayed anyway." Claire sipped her wine, smiling. "So you're stranded?" "Maybe not. Maybe this is where I was supposed to be." His eyes held hers too long for comfort. Or maybe just long enough. They talked for hours. About childhood fears, the people they used to be, the art that moved them. Julian showed her a photo on his phone, a black and white image of an old woman standing in a crumbling doorway in Palermo. Claire's eyes welled up for reasons she didn't understand. At some point, the talking stopped. Not from lack of words, but because there were no words left that mattered. Julian set his glass down. "Claire," she looked up. "Can I kiss you?" She didn't answer. She leaned forward. The first kiss was soft, tender. His hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her closer as her lips parted slightly. The second kiss was deeper, hungrier. A whisper turned into a roar, robes untied. Hands wandered, breaths quickened. The room filled with the sound of rain again, but inside it was heat, sheets and skin and tangled limbs. Claire gasped when his mouth traced her collarbone, her fingers digging into his back as they pressed together, IT wasn't rushed, but it wasn't slow either. It was desperate in the way all good passion is, urgent, but filled with something unspoken. Something moored, as they collapsed into each other, bodies slick and warm. Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt seen. The early light seeped gently through the linen curtains, casting soft golden rays across the room. Claire stirred, her cheek nestled against the curve of Julian's shoulder, the scent of skin and faded wine still lingering in the air. Outside the window, birds sang faintly, a contrast to the storm that had raged the night before. The world had quieted. And somehow, so had she. For a long moment, she didn't move. She simply listened, to his breath, to the rhythm of morning, to the hush that wrapped around them like an invisible thread. Julian lay on his side, his arm draped over her waist. He was still asleep, brow relaxed, lips parted slightly in the kind of peace only deep sleep brings. Claire found herself watching him, not just looking, but truly seeing. The man she had met less than 24 hours ago felt familiar now, like a passage from an old book she hadn't read in years, but somehow still remembered. She slowly sat up, the sheet sliding across her bare skin. Her robe lay draped on the back of a chair, forgotten. Her body ached, not from discomfort, but from the intense closeness of the night before. Her mind, however, was full of questions, of wonder, of what-ifs. What was this really? A fleeting encounter? A beautiful accident? Or something rare that had arrived too suddenly to be labeled? Julian stirred, eyes opening slowly. His gaze found her instantly, and a sleepy, sincere smile curved his lips. "Good morning," he said, his voice husky with sleep. Claire returned the smile. "Morning." He reached for her hand without hesitation, threading their fingers together. "I was afraid you'd be gone when I woke up. I was afraid it wouldn't feel the same in the morning," she replied quietly. "And does it?" Claire looked at him, eyes clear. "It feels even more real." Julian exhaled, as if he'd been holding his breath. "Last night was not something I planned, but I don't think I could have stopped it even if I wanted to." "I know," she said softly. "It felt inevitable." They lay in silence for a while longer, fingers still entwined. It was a silence that said everything words couldn't. About comfort, about connection, about the strange, beautiful timing of life. Eventually, Julian stood and pulled on his jeans, walking barefoot to the window. "Look," he said, drawing the curtain back fully. "The garden's blooming." Claire joined him, wrapping herself in a blanket, standing beside him as they looked down at the rose-filled garden below. The storm had washed everything clean. The roses glistened with morning dew, their petals open wide. "It's strange," he murmured. "I've traveled a lot, met people, had moments, but this feels different." Claire nodded. "It does." He turned to her, his hand cupping her cheek. "I don't know what this is, Claire, but I don't want it to end at checkout time." A laugh escaped her, small and honest. "Neither do I, but let's not rush to define it. Let's just let it be for now." Julian tilted his forehead against hers. "You're right. We let it begin. We can let it breathe." They packed slowly, dressing with pauses in between, small touches, quiet smiles, lingering glances. Every motion carried a kind of sacred hesitation, like they were trying not to disturb a delicate balance. Down in the lobby, the receptionist smiled politely as Julian checked out. Claire stood beside him, her bag slung over her shoulder, heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't known in years. At the door, Julian turned to her. "I don't want to say goodbye." "Then don't," she whispered. He leaned in, kissing her gently. Not like the night before, filled with heat and urgency. This kiss was softer, slower, full of meaning. It tasted like new beginnings. When they finally pulled away, she smiled. "I'm not going far. Room 212, remember?" His grin widened. "That's right. Still neighbors." She watched him walk away through the front doors, disappearing into the soft light of day. But she knew this wasn't an ending. This was a pause, a space to return to. Back in her room, Claire finally opened her laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then moved. It started on a rainy night in a quiet hotel, where two strangers collided like thunder and found silence in each other's arms. She smiled to herself. This wasn't just inspiration. It was the beginning of a love story.